All right, you are listening to the Age of Agility podcast, and this week we're joined by Mark Beckmann. He's joining us from Microsoft. Mark, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I'm really excited to talk about kind of everything from your perspective here. So why don't, without kind of burying the lead too much, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm part of Microsoft's worldwide manufacturing sector organization. Kind of the simplest way to put what I do is I work with our big manufacturing clients in order to help them really focus on Industry 4.0 and their digitization efforts. I've been with Microsoft 15 years now and 37 years in the software business and loving every minute. And I'm sure we'll have some good conversation about my opinions on why this is probably the most exciting time to be in software these days.
Yeah, that was a big kind of point I think it was you led with that when we first met, and I'm really excited to talk to you about that. You've been in this space for a while, as you mentioned. Like, tell us a little bit about that journey. How has your career kind of taken shape as this idea of digital transformation has evolved?
Yeah, so I'll get to digital transformation last, but I honestly landed in technology. Maybe by dumb luck, maybe I have a horseshoe on my person somewhere, but I have a degree in education, which is interesting in and of itself because education is really is substantial in the manufacturing space today. So I actually started working for a software company. I wrote training materials because they couldn't hire enough people that knew the software business. It was right after IBM unbundled hardware and software. So we were educating our own, and that was part of my job at this software company. Kind of a funny story is my first day there, they said, "You're going to be selling before too long." And I said, "Nah, probably not." And then I slowly became, a pre-sales engineer. And then I said, "Hey, sales guys are doing pretty well out there. Let me see if I can be one of those." And and since that time, I actually, that was the time where technology was kind of not on a hockey stick, but it was growing quite nicely at the time. And companies were getting acquired left and right. And my company got acquired. I left the company, went to a smaller company, wouldn't call it a startup, did partnerships with them, did OEM type of relationships, and gathered a lot of expertise and partnerships in that community as well. Acquisitions happened there too, so I moved on and actually started doing some startups. Some were good, some were challenging. Ended up, taking that and parlaying that into eventually landing at Microsoft. And to be perfectly candid, my variety of things that I've done in the past, whether it be pre-sales, sales, partnerships, really were advantageous in working for a company like Microsoft because we're a partner organization, number one. Number two is those skills translate into the job of working with our big manufacturing clients because it's an ecosystem of players that they really need to figure out how to blend those together in order to solve their new challenges in Industry 4.0.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about that. What is this Industry 4.0?
Well, it's there's revolutions, evolutions that have taken place in the past, from the steam engine to computerization of the factory floor, and that's where we are today, moving beyond that. All right, and the reality is that digital transformation has really increased because of a couple things. Number one is, Industry 4.0 really was crafted about 11, 12 years ago in Germany. With what they were doing, and it's kind of morphed over into the United States. And to be candid, the United States companies and actually companies around the world have been slow to adopt on that. But Industry 4.0 really is about how do I take technology that is growing substantially, did start to digitize more of my operations and get smarter about how I do things. All right. So how can I, for example, take artificial intelligence and understand the telemetry that's coming off of my machinery in my plant in order to be able to do smart things with that, to prevent failures, for example. Candidly, digital transformation is just about everything that we can think of from a product standpoint. All right. I can buy a washer and dryer now that tells me when my load is done or when I need to add soap to the dispenser. And all that connected nature is actually churning a lot of data on how people are using products that can actually be fed back into the engineering design phase or into the warranty and maintenance side where I need to put parts into locations or trucks in order to solve a problem that a customer or a business has and go forward with their normal daily life or their production process themselves. So digital transformation, Industry 4.0 to me is kind of the same thing. And it's all the smart use of technology. And I would say, too, the democratization of technology, because normal subject matter experts can use and code today. And that's the hidden value, I think, in what the value is of digital transformation in Industry 4.0 that's left to be tapped into.
Cool. That's really exciting stuff. And you bring up some really interesting points, which is like the products that are being manufactured today have they're so much smarter, right? There's so much more data. They communicate to other platforms. It makes things pretty complex. How do you help your partner companies navigate this level of complexity?
Well, it kind of goes back to how they were formed, and to be candid, how to break down some of those habits. Some are bad, some aren't so bad. All right, but one of the things that I work with our manufacturing clients on really is to see what the art of the possible is. All right. And how they can think about breaking down some of the silos or blending the silos that they do have. Uh, COVID has changed a lot. All right. Geopolitical events have changed the way that manufacturers think about their operations. And the hard, cold reality is that they have information stuffed into distinct areas of the organization. They'll have information on manufacturing, but they might not have blended that with demand planning or sales and operations planning that can see the span of the life's the growth or demand chain itself. They have, in some cases, logistics systems that tell them where stuff is, but that doesn't get back into the procurement hands or the engineer's hands to say, hey, can I order this part or spec this part in order to be able to build what the client wants and be able to deliver it within the time period that they want. So breaking down these silos is really kind of essential in what goes on with that. Now, the interesting thing about this is, yeah, we have some ways that we've done things in the past, and we're encumbered by that a little bit. But the biggest thing isn't necessarily the technology piece. All right, it's the people and process. All right, and I actually deal a lot with those conversations in terms of what do we need to do to change the way that we think about things? Who is it in the manufacturing plant, the supply chain area, in the IT organization that has responsibility for some of the IT side of the business to be able to go forward? So it's really a combination. To be candid, I think some of the things that I've done in the past with partnerships in particular is essentially what I'm doing internal to the clients that I serve today, to piece them together with the business people, with the IT people, so that they can actually solve some bigger and more important problems in the organization.
Yeah, that's something that we hear quite frequently. Having to balance that kind of IT silo and the business silo and and break that down. Really, it's two way different, completely focused. Priorities, focuses, whatever you want to say, and kind of giving everybody that one source of truth is always seems to be the answer there.
Well, yeah, that's a big component of it. It's the one source of truth that everybody's looking for, and it's kind of like the needle in the haystack, if you will, being able to really have some visibility on what's happening in the organization.
Yeah, how with some of these organizations have been around for a while. They've kind of evolved these processes in silos. How do you help them kind of break that down and bring it back to that one source of truth?
Yeah, a big chunk of what I do is actually tee up a point of view, a perspective on things. There's some interesting companies that are doing some leading edge, bleeding edge, some would call it, types of things. You don't have to look too far. Just go to the World Economic Forum Lighthouse and see what they're doing, and how, more importantly, perhaps how they're doing it. And as I said earlier, COVID has changed a lot. I would say, too, that the climate change issues are pushing sustainability to the forefront of most manufacturers today. All right. And so those are, I want to use the term cudgel, maybe a little softer than that, but those are good encouragement for manufacturers to think about, because they're real. All right. And every manufacturer that I talk to is thinking about sustainability. They're going to have to report that. All right. What they understand too is that their supply chain and the sustainability that they have to report has aspects in the supply chain as well. So I source from a particular supplier. How are they sustainable? All right. And that's got to go into the mix in how I report back and prove to people that I'm being a good citizen of the world from a sustainability perspective. So, point of view, perspectives, but then a lot of what I do is actually work within the organization. All right. Typically a manufacturing plant or a supply chain particular problem, in order to scope that out and to understand the value drivers behind it. What's the ultimate benefit that you're going to get out of this? Because quite frankly, if it's a low number, might not want to do it. Right? We try to look for big rocks that we can attach to that say this is the value that we have if we embark on this initiative. And it's the use cases beyond underneath that are really driving the conversations that I have. Typically, once somebody says, "Yeah, I need to focus on sustainability," or "I need to focus on my predictive maintenance aspects to keep my operation running more effectively," or "How do I optimize things?" And so those use cases tend to drive the value conversation and the items that we need to check off, and quite frankly, the people that need to be involved in the whole process.
No, that makes sense. I think, especially when you're working with other organizations, you have to figure out kind of where their focus is, what they care about the most, and then you can work from there, right? What?
If I can just add a couple of things. I mean, here's the kind of to me that the thing that kind of keeps me alive and focused on getting up every day is, number one is these companies haven't done this before. All right. Number two is they sometimes think that they have the answers, but they need other people to really validate if they're going down the right path on things. So it's one of those kind of interesting areas that we're dealing with where nobody has the perfect method of doing this. All right. Yeah, we've got best practices. Yes, we have templates on how to do things. But, what gets me up in the morning is saying, how can I really impact their business?
Yeah, I mean, you stole the question out from me, but but I think that's really interesting. And what does that look like? From business A to business B, it probably changes.
Well, it does. It's one of the other thoughts that I was getting to in this is not all companies are shaped the same way. Right? Manufacturing, where the money is made, is the products that are produced. All right. And you jeopardize that by introducing change. All right. And that's a bridge you have to cross, a chasm you have to cross within the manufacturing leadership's minds to say, okay, we're going to go focus on digitization. All right. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I don't want to do that because I print money by the products that I build and sell. All right. And so how do we get across that? So there's a lot of negotiation there. As I said, not all manufacturers are shaped the same way. All right, we have some that have distinct P&L for business units. We have some that are regionally focused. Some that have different archetypes and build different things. For example, they'll make to stock or engineer to order. I mean, it's the extremes of how some of these companies operate that kind of puts them in a different boat when it comes to digital transformation. So it's navigating a lot of that goes into the work that I do with our clients. And in a lot of cases, it's breaking down the walls and silos. The other, it's people, process, culture that we have to deal with along those lines.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially in some of those manufacturing places, they need to be really confident in making a change before they do it. Because like you said, otherwise they're going to lose out on...
They're engineers. I mean, candidly, I'm kind of an engineer mindset. I want it to be perfect. All right.
Right.
And fortunately, one of the things that we've learned from digital transformation is you're going to fail. All right, because you're experimenting in some cases. So, but don't be afraid of that. All right, embrace it, saying what can I learn from those efforts that might have led it to a failure, depending on how you want to call it, a failure or not. All right, or if you want to call it a failure, but how do I learn from that going forward? Because to be honest with you, you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah. It's almost like you're teaching these people it's okay to fail sometimes.
Well, maybe that's the goodness of my background and my education, formal education, is I'm kind of a teacher in that regard.
Yeah, I find, it's funny. I talk to a few folks who come from a teaching background, and it's always such a strength, right? Because it just, you're like, okay, I'm going to calmly explain this to you, and we're going to figure out how this applies to you specifically. And it's just I feel like it's like that pedagogical approach is really helpful sometimes when explaining big changes or things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. My parents will thank you for that comment.
I mean, how do you take? Are there other examples of that where you sort of use your teaching background or know-how to?
Hey, Nick, you broke up on that, so I didn't get the
Oh,
question.
sorry. I asked if are there other examples where you've used that teaching experience or background to help convince partners or companies you're working with to make some changes?
Yeah, well, that it changes. Plus, just from a teaching perspective, I mean, part of my job actually is to work with our clients um, to build out new services. All right, so just about every manufacturer is focused not on just the hard good product, but the service that goes with it. And they're doing that because the cloud has really changed the way that they can stitch themselves to their clients. All right. So if I sell a warranty, I mean, for a great example is a car. All right. I might choose to buy the prepaid warranty. Well, that gets me back into the dealership. And it's no different when you're selling, cars, washers, dryers, heating, ventilating, air conditioning systems, uh, you know, big mixers that go into big manufacturing plants or pipelines. All right. So the companies that sell to all these companies want to have that recurring revenue in that. And so I go out and sell with some of our clients. And part of that is educating them on two things. Number one is what's the solution, but the other thing is changing the way that they think about things. If I'm used to selling hardware, that's one conversation. If I'm used to selling services, it's more like the benefit of that, all right, or the risk aversion part of that I need to apply to in order to be able to have that. Now, I also do education internally with our organization. So, I mean, as much as I work with our client account teams, I am educating them on what manufacturers need and what their big challenges are going forward, and trying to give them a feel and education on what it is that they need to be talking to their clients about in order to get them to shift, think differently, open up new doors to new people that we haven't been talking to, and have richer conversations as well. So yeah, the teaching kind of comes into all aspects a little bit of what I do.
That makes sense. You gotta convince folks, and I think the best way to do that in a business or engineering context is through teaching them.
So, no, hey, when you can stand alongside them and help them go forward, I mean, there's a lot of rewarding things that you get with that as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. Working with so many companies, we talked about a few things here. You said, coaching them through making big changes and accepting failure or planning for failure. But is there any other advice you find yourself giving to the companies you work with?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a couple things that I could talk about. I mean, there's an old adage, think big, start small, go fast, right? Um, and that goes into failing fast too. All right, and so that goes back with the failure type of conversation. Um, think differently is another conversation that I tend to have with organizations. Right? And I can quickly describe that to you. Most manufacturers have a continuous improvement function, right, within the plants, or maybe even formalized in some sort of a corporate type of function. But my contention is that normal continuous improvement isn't going to get us there because we need to go fast. All right. And I'm used to making incremental type of improvements, which is the notion of how we've always done improvements in manufacturing. But the reality is that technology is so much more advanced and moving so much more rapidly for someone to absorb, whether it's the IT or not, is immaterial, to be honest with you, because the technology is now so much more democratized that the people in the manufacturing plants actually can grab a hold of some of these bits of technology and actually do some smart things with them. And that too kind of keeps me energized and passionate about things, because when I see a plant manager that's using technology that they'd never used before, that was always in the hands of IT, and they're saying, I'm running my business off of this now. All right. And IT didn't necessarily have anything to do with this. Yeah, they kind of helped me. They made sure that the data was available. But this is what I did and built to run my operation. And that's actually a great success story that we've seen a lot these days, because technology is getting so much better and much more democratized.
Yeah, we've been seeing that on our end as well, where it's so many companies are kind of investing in these tools to give people at the front line of business, or operations, kind of the tools to, tweak and make adjustments to the tech themselves without having to invest a ton of time in coding or other things like that.
Well, kind of a funny story I'll give you. I was at an event last week, a casual event, and I was talking to a gentleman who's a buyer for a company. And we were talking a little bit of digital transformation. And I kind of kidded him. I said, how do you deal with your ERP? Right? Because I know ERP is traditionally notoriously not friendly for a lot of users. And he said, all I want is the data. And I said, you give me the data and I'll be happy, because I can manipulate the data from there. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what's happened in most companies. All right. Manufacturers, yeah, sure. But I'm sure this is typical of, the financial services sector as well. So just give me the data so that I can do things with it. I know what to do in order to understand the data, as long as I'm confident in the data and you make it accessible to me. So it's kind of a funny story that goes along the lines of just give the end users really what they want.
Yeah, I can't imagine that wouldn't be helpful for anybody to be like, yes, this is the true set of data,
That is
Do with it
actually
what you
the
may.
biggest problem that most manufacturers in particular deal with. Is my data clean? All right. And
Yeah,
is it contextualized? So can I really use it once you do give it to me?
that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I think like that's sort of that thing. We're going back to the, needing that single source of truth or something like that.
Indeed.
All right. Um, let's see here. So, we talked a little bit about this, but I just want you to expand a little bit. You mentioned when we first met that it's the most fun time, the funnest time to work in software. You want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I guess 37 years gives you the right to say that it's the most fun or the most challenging. For me, it's the most fun. All right.
That's
And,
good.
and, and here's a little bit why. And it kind of goes back to my origination in the mainframe world, right? Very monolithic, not necessarily. But most companies back then had a massive IT department that they were responsible for programming. And to be honest with you, it's kind of dwindled down a little bit. It depends on the company, of course, but it's changed a lot in that regard. Uh, but I kind of alluded to it when I was talking about digital transformation. Is the technology is just so much more developed and so much easier to use today. Way back in the mainframe days, I worked for a company. We had a report writer. All right. All right. And at the time, we were kind of democratizing it because we let users get the data and they could manipulate it how they wanted to. Yeah, sure, it was a mainframe or eventually an AS400 or eventually client server and a PC type of operation. But, reporting has always been out there. But today, I gave you some stories. I mean, if a plant manager, a subject matter expert can actually do things that impacts their operations without having to program things, to me, that's a very good thing. All right. And part of why it's good is because there's not enough programmers out there to do what the businesses need to do today. So in some respects, we need to unleash the subject matter experts and the people that are in the plants, in my case, in order to do some of these things. That's what makes it fun, because these people are doing things that they don't typically do in their job. And boy, most people think about manufacturing as a dirty, grimy type of thing. All right. I'm used to looking at the old clips of steel mills, all right, where I've got these big furnaces and guys are pouring molten metal into these forms in order to create whatever. All right. And we need to change the view of that. And technology is one bit that can change the way that manufacturers think about things. That kind of kid, there's really two applications that manufacturers need to think about in their plant floor. Number one is smartphone applications, because everybody has one. And it's very useful in order to solve problems and take pictures. Sometimes we don't want those pictures to get out of the organization, sure. All right. But if I can easily describe to somebody in a picture and say, how do I fix this? Great. And the second thing that they need is social, anything social, all right? Because everybody knows that there's a person in that plant that can solve something for them, all right? And social is a mechanism to figure out how to connect to a person that can fix a machine, repair a machine, notify somebody that there's a problem in the organization. So again, that's one of the things that kind of keeps me excited about this. But what I'm keenly interested in right now is some of the advanced technologies. There's so many amazing things that can be done with machine learning and artificial intelligence today. I can assess quality. All right, I can build a simple application that uses a camera to do that. Again, kind of a democratized type of process. And opening up people's eyes is really one of the reasons why I think this is one of the most exciting times. Not to mention the fact that, as I said, technology is going like this, and our ability to absorb it's going like this. All right, and so how do I bridge the gap between what we can do and what we need to do in order to advance and digitize our own operations?
Yeah, the gap between what you can do and what you need to do is often not always the same list of things, I'm sure.
Well, definitely. I mean, it's kind of funny getting back to this story where the subject matter expert in the plant built this application.
Yeah.
IT didn't even know about they didn't have an application in the backlog that said this guy needs to build this in order to run his business. And to me, there's a hidden backlog that people don't always think about, that is untapped, unknown by some parts of the organization. And the only people that can really do it effectively and do it in an accelerated time frame is the subject matter experts using low code, no code type of tools.
I guess just like tell us a little bit more about that. Like let's kind of pull this apart a little bit more. What did that look like before these sort of low code or no code tools were available? Is it sat chiefly with IT? How long did these things tend to take?
Well, quite frankly, in manufacturing, a lot of it's paper driven. If you go into the majority of manufacturers today, you'll see a bill of materials. You'll see a checklist that says, did we do this, all right, function? Or did we have somebody sign off on the quality of this? And that's all too common still in manufacturing, even in the most advanced manufacturers, all right? Still a lot of paper in the process. So in a lot of cases, it's as simple as how do I digitize that? And again, that's kind of where a smartphone or a tablet kind of comes into play. All right.
Yeah.
We have one example that you can assess the quality of a product coming off, and instead of having the quality guy do it, maybe I equip the people on the plant floor, the workers, with an application that allows them to snap a picture and assess the quality of that product going through. All of a sudden, I go from one guy doing it on a daily basis to all of my plant workers doing it, which gives me a much richer set of data that I can feed back into the product design, feed back into the manufacturing guys that can run the production lines that much more efficiently and optimized. Those are kind of the types of things that I see fairly typical. That's kind of the first cut of a lot of the digitization efforts that we have in some of the, especially discrete manufacturers. Process manufacturers are a little bit different because they have a recipe that they need to follow typically in order to produce a product. Discrete has longer term, processes in some case. You need to weld something, for example, and it might take me a week to weld it. Right? So digitization. The second thing is how can I start to use artificial intelligence on some of this? And some of it's experimentation. What's intriguing to me is as companies start to look at sustainability and scrap, the aspect of energy that goes into producing something that doesn't generate revenue for us, it goes into scrap, is intriguing. And there's some really cool artificial intelligence capabilities today that allows us to do some smart things using cameras, for example, and the perfect image of the product, and comparing that in a camera type of setting in order to assess quality. And to, going a step further than that, can I, for example, if it's a 20-step process to do something, can I understand at step number 4 if there's rework that I can shove back into step 1 or 2 that I can fix before it reaches step 20, where I find out that it's scrap. All right. So artificial intelligence, machine learning kind of goes into the mix and all this stuff. And I kind of described some projects that I've worked on with manufacturers, but that's the reality of some of the things that we're dealing with, and the evolution, I think, of getting connected and getting digitized and then using that data smartly.
No, that makes so much sense. And, immediately just, it was so transparent when you were saying that. Like, if you get stuff off paper and you start logging it digitally, all of a sudden the opportunity for scale becomes so much easier because it's, a digital item kind of can be accessed by so many more people than a piece of paper.
Yeah, you hit on kind of a bone of contention with a lot of discussions that we have with our clients, and that's scale. All right, everybody wants to digitize. Everybody wants Industry 4.0. What they really have a hard challenge doing is trying to figure out how to do it at enterprise scale. All right, and do it in a fairly rapid time frame. I said 11, 12 years ago, Industry 4.0 came into being in Germany. And it's taken that period of time in order for us to get some manufacturers to say, yeah, I need to do this and I need to do it at enterprise scale.
I mean, that enterprise scale is kind of, it's always something that's interesting because when you hear about these kind of, I don't know, newer companies that are doing something a completely different way, or they've, revolutionized some process, it tends to be a, startup or a really small new company. So they're starting from, a digital square one. But some of these other companies, that are already, have grown to such a large size, they need to switch fast. So, I guess that's where you come in.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting from the perspective of, quite frankly, working at Microsoft, people don't think us as a manufacturer, right? And I think I shared this when we chatted earlier, is they don't understand that we make Surface, we make, sorry to talk about products, we make Surface and Xbox, we make data centers. And, I work with some big manufacturers, and I say to them, I said, what we stuff into a container, into a data center, quite frankly, is a lot like what you would put into a semi truck, a car, a tractor, same type of concept and same engineering principles. And quite frankly, fairly consistent manufacturing processes that we go through in order to produce it. And that that's part of where we come in, right? But the old adage, it takes a village. I think you are going down the path. We have manufacturers that have done it this way for a long time. It's not uncommon to have an asset that's producing that product that's lived in that manufacturing plant 20, 30, 40 years in some cases. Right? And so how do I take that old of a piece of equipment and upgrade it to Industry 4.0 or digital? Right? And so, it takes a village conversation, as some of those manufacturers are probably trying to figure out, the machine builders are trying to digitize and provide new services for clients. At the same time, there's expertise with systems integrators that actually can be part of the solution as well. And some of these guys are big integrators, and some of them are small boutique type of integrators that have a specific type of expertise. And that's why I say, that's where we come in, but it's really a team of folks that tends to work on these projects in order to bring them to fruition.
Of course, yeah. No, I mean, like you said, it takes a village. I don't think you seem like a pretty smart guy, but I don't think that you could single-handedly kind of win all the hearts and minds.
Well, it's to even think that one person could do it is a misnomer, because if you walk into any large manufacturer, they're going to have equipment and machines from a dozen, maybe more machine builders that are all producing things, and they all have their specific ways of doing things. They're all going to break down at different times. They're all going to have different parts that I need to source or put in my tool shed or my warehouse in the factory in order to have them available so I can fix things. So it's that too is kind of what keeps me passionate about this whole conversation, is because there's just so many moving parts to this, and it's kind of the puzzle that we need to figure out and how to do something and hopefully do it at enterprise scale.
No, that's great. This was a fantastic conversation. I loved hearing kind of everything about bringing, kind of digital transformation to these companies that have, been around forever or just need to change their process. Is there, I guess, anything else that we haven't talked about that you feel like would be valuable for our listeners?
I mean, I think we covered a lot, but maybe some parting advice is just be an open mind to things. Seek out guidance from people. Like I said, this is something that is. I mean, if you think about the steam engine, if you think about automation, you think about the production line. Right? Those are all part of the industrial revolutions of the past. Some companies didn't make it. All right, probably because they didn't pay attention to things, and probably because they didn't think big, start small, and go fast. All right, or embrace failures as well. So, if I had to kind of summarize one of the things that I think we talked about, but maybe not articulated, succinctly, is be open to new thinking and open to learning about technologies that really can help you drive things forward.
No, that's a great point. Something that I think was probably buried in everything we talked about today, but it's good to say directly too. Well, thanks again for joining us today. We talked a lot about work stuff, but how have you been? What's going on in your life, and are you looking forward to anything coming up?
Yeah, well, actually, we are looking forward to Christmas markets in Germany, which is kind of a favorite pastime for my wife and I. I kind of funny. I had this conversation the other day. Is I've started to travel again, right? And to me, it's like relearning some of the things that you forgot during COVID. Like I need to get to the airport in time. All right, I need to pack accordingly. All right, and to be honest with you, we are so used to doing meetings back to back to back to back, from in some cases 7 to 7, 12 hours a day. All right. Where now all of a sudden I need to figure out I need an hour to get to the airport, and I need a little bit of a buffer time in order to get to the gate I need to be at. So how have I been doing? I'm challenged by that right now and getting back into the swing of things in that hybrid type of operation. But it couldn't, like I said, it's a fun time in technology. And, I'm fortunate and blessed to work for one of the best companies in the world as well.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like I talked to a few folks, as we do this show, and so many people are like looking forward to traveling again or have just started again. And so I'm excited for you. Germany will be fun. When are you going?
December.
Nice.
All right. Another funny story too. I recently volunteered for one of the golf tournaments, and I decided to do that because I knew that I absolutely could not look at my email during that point in time. So I figured out how to disconnect, and the Christmas markets is a good way to disconnect as well.
Yeah, that's actually really good advice. Find activities that force you to disconnect.
Yeah.
To all of you out there, you can find us on quickbase.com/podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. And we'll catch you in a few weeks to share more stories and advice from the folks managing the complex projects changing our world. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.